Приветствую всех в Школе Джобса, с вами я, Достон, и сегодня мы с вами разберем легендарную речь Стива Джобса перед выпускниками Стэнфорда. Это видео будет полезно не только для изучения языка, но и для жизни в целом. Итак, слушаем 3 истории из жизни великого человека.
To be honored – быть удостоенным, иметь честь. Commencement – церемония присвоения ученых степеней и вручения дипломов. To graduate from – оканчивать высшее учебное заведение, а существительно будет graduation – окончание, и еще graduate student – аспирант. Truth be told – по правде говоря. No big deal – ничего особенного или важного.
I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college. And this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories.
А перед тем, как мы продолжим, хотел бы посоветовать вам канал для тех, кто реально хочет выучить английский язык, English Galaxy. Это реально помогает. Канал ведет преподаватель с сертификатом на преподавание от Кембриджского университета. Обязательно подписывайтесь на канал, ссылочка в описании.
To drop out of – бросать. Школу, колледж, университет, whatever. Stay around – оставаться. A drop in – нежданный гость.
The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out?
To put somebody up for adoption – отдать на усыновление, удочерение. To pop out – разговорная фраза, которая переводится как «родиться». To be on a waiting list – быть в списке ожидания.
My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course."
To sign papers – подписать бумаги. Find out – узнавать.
My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers.
College tuition – плата за обучение. To have no idea – не иметь никакого представления. To figure something out – обдумывать что-либо. To work out – улаживать, решить какую-либо задачу или проблему.
And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working-class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay.
A dorm room – комната в общежитии. To get a good meal – хорошо поесть или дословно достать хорошую еду. To stumble into – сталкиваться. To turn out to be priceless – оказаться бесценным.
It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example.
To take a class – записаться на предмет. Fascinating – замечательный или увлекательный. To find something fascinating – считать что-либо замечательным, восхищаться чем-либо. A typeface – типографический шрифт, гарнитура.
Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating.
To grow from, into, вырасти из, до. Чаще всего говорится о предприятии, компании. To release a creation, выпустить творение, создание. To get fired, быть уволенным.
My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started?
To run the company, управлять компанией. Diverge, расходиться, отличаться, имеется в виду о мнениях чаще всего. Visions of the future begin to diverge. Взгляды на будущее стали расходиться. To have a falling out, поссориться.
Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. When we did, our board of directors sided with him. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating.
Entrepreneur, businessman, предприниматель. To screw up, испортить что-либо, напортачить. To be a very public failure, быть жертвой публичного провала. To dawn on somebody, проясняться, когда суть вопроса становится ясна.
I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly. I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did.
To read a quote, прочесть цитату. To make an impression on somebody, произвести впечатление на кого-либо.
My third story is about death. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something.
To encounter a tool, находить метод. In the face of death, перед лицом смерти. To avoid the trap, избежать заблуждением. To follow somebody's heart, следовать зову сердца.
Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart.
To be diagnosed with, получить диагноз какой-либо болезни. A scan, томограмма. A tumor, опухоль. A pancreas, поджелудочная железа. To be incurable, быть неизлечимым.
About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months.
To get affairs in order, привести дела в порядок. Everything is buttoned up, все улажено.
My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes.
Intestines – кишки, кишечник. To be sedate – быть без сознания, в отключке. To be curable with surgery – излечимые операции. To have the surgery – перенести операцию.
I lived with that diagnosis all day. Later that evening, I had a biopsy where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach and into my intestines, put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the doctors started crying because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery. I had the surgery, and thankfully, I'm fine now.
To face death – быть под угрозой смерти. To live through something – пережить что-либо.
This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept.
To be trapped by dogma – попадать в ловушку догмы. Have the courage – иметь мужество, смелость.
Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
The Bibles of the Generation – настольные книги поколения. To come along – появляться, делать успехи, продвигаться.
When I was young, there was an amazing publication called the Whole Earth Catalog, which was one of the Bibles of my generation. It was sort of like Google in paperback form 35 years before Google came along. It was idealistic, overflowing with neat tools and great notions.
To put out an issue – сделать выпуск, имеется в виду газеты, журнала. To be somebody's age – быть одного возраста с кем-либо. A back cover – задняя страница обложки. A farewell message – прощальное послание.
Stewart and his team put out several issues of the Whole Earth Catalog, and then, when it had run its course, they put out a final issue. It was the mid-1970s, and I was your age. On the back cover of their final issue was a photograph of an early morning country road, the kind you might find yourself hitchhiking on if you were so adventurous. Beneath it were the words, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." It was their farewell message as they signed off. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And I have always wished that for myself. And now, as you graduate to begin anew, I wish that for you. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you all very much.
А теперь, чтобы закрепить этот урок, посмотрите видео полностью, сначала с субтитрами, а потом и без, на сайте puzzleenglish.com по ссылке в описании. И, конечно, пройдите тест на аудирование, это бесплатно, так что заходите и практикуйтесь. На этом все. И как всегда, если здесь вы впервые, подписывайтесь на канал и оставляйте свои комментарии. Теперь видео будут выходить 2 раза чаще, так что не пропустите. А с вами прощаюсь, но еще увидимся. See you next time.